Welcome to the Real Estate Investing Club. This is the place everyday real estate investors gather to share their best stories, biggest insights, and favorite tactics to grow a portfolio of cash-flowing properties in today's market. Here's your host, Gabe Peterson.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Club. Today we have David Chan with us from Farm Together. David has over 7 years of experience in finance and technology across agribusiness, and he is here to talk about investing in farmland. This is going to be super exciting. I don't know virtually zero about investing in farmland, but it's been big in headlines out there. I think it was Bill Gates got into a lot of headlines where he's starting to buy up all the farmland for whatever reason. So I'm really interested in this. David, thanks very much for hopping on the show.
Thanks, Gabe. Happy to be here and happy to chat agricultural real estate with you.
Absolutely. I told you before we got on here, we like stories. We like to hear how people got to where they are. I'm sure you got a good story. So why don't you take us back to the beginning? How'd you get started in real estate?
Sure. So the very beginning, I grew up in New York's Hudson Valley. I know you're in Washington, Gabe, and that's currently Apple Country, but believe it or not, Apple Country used to be New York State. So I grew up around, I grew up around apple orchards, and first job was on an orchard as a picker, and I grew up around the industry. Did not think that I would end up here. My lifelong passion has always been meteorology. So growing up in the Hudson Valley, got to see everything from hurricanes to blizzards to tornadoes, you name it. Thunder snow is the best. Studied, yeah, it's wild. Studied meteorology in college at Cornell. But while I was there, I also did a lot of research around climate and studying what others were researching about climate, what we know about how our climate's changing, and came to the conclusion that we know enough of where this is going. We need industry leaders to do something, to be part of the solution. And so pivoted from academia more towards industry and trying to make a positive influence in how we will deal with climate. And so I looked at different industries that were out there. And ag is a really unique one because there's a circular relationship with how agriculture and the environment interact. How we farm is going to impact either positively or negatively what carbon and other emissions we're sequestering from the atmosphere or emitting into the atmosphere. And then similarly, the way our climate is changing may dictate where we grow what today. And so Apple Country might be in Washington right now, but if trends continue and if we don't mitigate emissions, British Columbia is looking pretty compelling. So, I could not think of another industry that had this circular relationship like ag and farming does. And so that's what led me to look at this industry and ultimately join the industry. After college, I worked in finance for a couple of years at an investment bank, and then joined a early stage ag tech startup called Grow Intelligence, focused on AI in agriculture. They're now a Series D or E company, so they've grown quite a bit since my time there. Went on to business school, so I got my MBA from Harvard and used that experience to really transition more to the investing side and learn how to put these two different skill sets together and invest in agriculture. And since then, I've been working in investment roles, first in agribusiness private equity, and then for the past 4 years, being part of the founding team at Farm Together and growing Farm Together from its inception into a nearly $200 million AUM asset manager.
Wow. That's a cool story. And the first question that I have out of that is, what is thunder snow?
Best question you could have asked. So thunder snow is when there's effectively convection or thunder activity during a winter event. So just because it's snowing doesn't mean you can't have convection. So really strong snowstorms will still have convective properties. And so you can get thunder and even lightning in a winter event, and it's called thunder snow. And it's just, it indicates that winter storm is super, super strong. It's very rare. But, in the Northeast, we have nor'easters. So typically a low pressure system, which is what storm systems are, will bottom out, so the low will deepen, meaning the pressure is dropping more and more. And when that happens, you have a lot of air lifting up into the atmosphere. And basically that's your best chance at getting this convective activity. So it is rare, but when it happens, I mean, you could be getting like 5 inches of snow an hour.
Damn, that's interesting. Sounds terrifying. Sounds like the beginning of like a horror movie.
Wow. It's amazing. It's amazing.
All right, but we're not here to talk about the weather. We're here to talk about real estate. So, a lot of questions pop up into my mind when you're talking through your segment there, and especially about investing in farmland. I wouldn't know how to approach it. So the first thing that really pops into my mind is, how do you underwrite farmland? And I'm assuming if if the average investor like myself, I focus on self-storage facilities, mobile home and RV parks. These are structures it's almost business to consumer with self-storage. And so I'm not looking at the land and what it can produce. I'm just looking at the structure and how it's utilized out there by other people. So with farmland, you're talking about, well, there's a lot that I don't know, so I don't want to stick my head too far into it. But from somebody who wanted to get into investing in farmland, how would they start? Like, how do you underwrite these things? Do you need to specialize by type of thing that you'd be growing? I'm going to sound like an idiot in this podcast, by the way, but because I don't know enough about farming. But I'm going to keep it. We're going to get into this, and hopefully we can give people who are interested in farmland a little bit of information about how they could get started. So let's start with, how do you underwrite farmland?
So underwriting is complex, because if you think of all the factors that go into an agricultural real estate investment property, there's a lot that goes on. So our underwriting process starts, I would say, with some environmental factors. Our portfolio is probably 80% concentrated on what we call specialty or permanent plantings. So those are commodities that are on long-lived assets like trees, vines. So that would be almonds, pistachios, apples, wine grapes, citrus, anything that's grown on a long-lived asset where you're underwriting that tree or that vine for economic productive life of 20, 30, maybe even 40 years. And that's a different risk profile than annual or row crops, where it's bare land, it's dirt, and you're planting every single year. So there is no long-lived asset. There is no tree that you're depending for crop or cash flow from for 30 or 40 years. Very different risk profile, very different markets, end markets, fundamentals, all of that. The specialty and permanent side is much more complex. There's a lot more differentiation, and I would say there are more nuances involved. So because that tends to be our focus, and where we believe we have a highly specialized team that can handle sourcing the best properties in permanent and specialty commodities, that's where our underwriting process is developed from. So for us, it starts with water. We are active in California, but I think everyone thinks water is an exclusive issue to California. It's not. There's water issues in Oregon. There's water issues in Washington. I would venture to say there's water issues across the entire U.S. I think they're just headlined in California. So for us, it's assessing water rights, groundwater, surface water, depending on the commodity that we are either planting, if we're developing the orchard, or if we're buying a mature turnkey orchard, what trees are already on the property, what is the water usage required by that commodity, looking at the irrigation that's installed, if it's most efficient, which would be in our field micro drip irrigation, if there's any potential to add value by improving irrigation, looking at flood potential. So does the property drain well? Is there proper tilling in place, tiling in place, to ensure that proper draining can occur? I think another, going back to recent articles, California has had lots of rain and snow over the past couple of months, and there's an entire body of water that has resurrected called Tulare Lake. And that's an extreme example of ponding, right? It's no different than if you have a spot in your backyard that if you get a really heavy rainstorm, that one spot's going to pond. This lake is essentially just one very, very extreme version of a pond. But when we look at a property, we consider factors, like tiling just for that, because you need to ensure that if you are in periods with high rainfall or snowfall, you have adequate drainage, and you want that rainfall to get into your aquifer. You want that rainfall to be replenishing the water infrastructure beneath your property to ensure that your groundwater remains sustainable. So for us, so much of the underwriting focuses on those environmental factors, including even the microclimate of the property. So you can have pretty much adjacent properties, whether it's tree nuts, almonds, citrus, whatever. Pretty much you could have neighboring properties, and you could have a frost event at one property and the other property is unscathed. Why does that happen? It comes down to microclimates, the elevation or grade on how one property sits, whether one property faces a particular direction, where winds tend to blow from. It is super local. So that is a majority of the time that we spend on the environmental side. After that, we consider obviously what any real estate investor would consider. What is the purchase price? We look at comps just like any other real estate investor would do. Comparable sales over the past 6 to 12 months, similar area, similar maturity. We try to get as close to comp set as we can. We do multiple valuation methodologies. So we look at a net present value or an NPV analysis. We use a discounted cash flow or DCF analysis. We look at multiples and comps. And so we have lots of different valuation methodologies. That's more of the financial side of it. I would say that solves for a good amount of the work. One underlying piece to all of this is an investment thesis. And so this all is underpinned on us having confidence in the end markets for whatever this commodity is. There could be an end market for one varietal of citrus that we have confidence in because school lunches will continue to use this specific variety of citrus, and we don't see that going away. Yeah. But another older variety might be going out of favor because it's not as convenient or so even within a category like citrus, there are some varieties that we think will be winners over a whole period or over the next 10, 20 years. Other varieties that we don't have confidence in. And so we wouldn't be doing all that work on environmental assessment and financial due diligence because we just don't have conviction in the end market. So that underpins all the existing underwriting work that we do. If we have confidence after going through all of that a property is still interesting, and that only happens about 1% of the time, we typically will pass on 99% of the on and off market opportunities that we come across. Then we would move forward into we would issue an LOI or a letter of interest, just like you would in real estate, get the property under contract. So similar, we would go under a purchase and sale agreement. And then in that period, that would be more of the formal due diligence phase where we would do formal environmental testing, soil testing, water quality testing, well testing, an ALTA survey. That's when we do all of the title work. So that becomes much more, regimented on a diligence basis. But
that sounds like a normal closing in real estate. I mean, you're doing all the steps that you would generally take if there was an industrial property, a mobile home RV park. But it sounds like you're front loading a lot of the environmental studies, which it sounds like is a lot more important in this asset class.
Absolutely. And I think, for us generally, once we're in formal diligence, probably similar to real estate, but if there's a surprise, it's typically a negative one. We find all of the convincing factors for moving forward with an investment in sort of the pre-contract or pre-diligence phase, and that's what brings us to a contract. But sometimes you might find something in the title report that is, that kills a deal. That can happen, and that's happened to us a couple of times. But that's what formal diligence is for, so that's why we do it.
So I'm curious. I mean, you guys are specialists. You guys are experts at Farmland. A lot of the people that listen to this podcast are not, major companies focused on this one niche market. They're general investors. They have, 10, 15 properties in their portfolio, and they're looking at different asset classes, considering things. Do you think Farmland is something that can be added to an average commercial investor's portfolio, or is this something that really does need to be left to someone who really specializes only in farmland? Because it sounds like there's a lot of additional knowledge that you need in order to run this.
I think the barrier to entry is a little higher than probably some other real estate investment classes, just because there's so much domain and
Yeah.
industry expertise required. I mean, you kind of need to be an agronomist. You need to be, there's so many different fields that come into it. But that's why, firms like Farm Together exist. And, we do try to make it possible and accessible for investors, not just real estate investors, but all investors to get the benefits of diversifying their portfolio by adding farmland. I think probably something that real estate investors may be surprised about to hear would be farmland is, by view of the IRS, considered a real property, just like a commercial real estate building would be, or a multifamily investment would be. So we do facilitate 1031 exchanges into farmland. We do that through two different products: separately managed accounts, which would just be a solely owned property, or we also do tenant in common interest for investors who maybe don't have quite as high the proceeds to put to work, but still want to leverage a 1031 roll into a like-kind property. And you can go from commercial real estate in Miami to an apple farm in Washington, and that's considered to be like kind. So I think that is something that we've learned, that even savvy real estate investors, we're not aware of how broad like kind can be. And it's, I think it's been welcome for many 1031 investors that we've worked with to see investment options that are differentiated, because I think they're very accustomed to most of those options looking very similar. So obviously ours are a bit different.
What about management when it comes to, you buy the farmland, now you have to actually produce the crop? Do you guys, or is that something that you hire? And this is a point where I might sound like an idiot, but is that something that you hire, for instance, a third party property manager, quote unquote, or the equivalent of, which would be, a farm operator, I guess? Is that something you hire out? Do you guys have that in-house? If somebody were to focus on farmland and wanted to do this themselves, would they have to become a farmer? Is there a market out there where you can go and find a farmer to take on your land? How does that all work?
Great question. Not a dumb question by any means. And it depends. So for your last point on can an private individual figure out, how to structure this on their own? It's not super easy to find talented growers. It is a very niche market, and for us, the diligence process, putting properties and deals aside, the diligence process for, the analogy would be a property manager, but an operating partner who we would hire to farm the property is, pretty intensive. And obviously, you could have the best piece of dirt in the world, but if you don't have a skilled operating partner to manage that property, you're never going to generate the income potential that you otherwise could. So it's a really important part of the equation. I think private individuals who just want to, lease the property out to a tenant and just do a triple net cash lease, that's probably doable. It's still onerous, but I'd say that's a much lower bar than
actually
farming it yourself or finding an operating partner to farm. And in different markets, leases might be a more attractive option. So in row crops, all of our properties are cash leases or flex leases. But in the permanent or specialty space, often we don't necessarily want to lease the property. Often we want to do what we call direct operating, and have exposure to price and yield, because we think that's how we'll generate the highest return on a risk-adjusted basis for our clients. So, it also depends on what the property, where the property is and what the property's commodity is. For us, we have an internal asset management team. We have a head of asset management and several asset managers. And what those folks do, they are all growers by background, or agronomists, and they have technical backgrounds in the space. They effectively are going out to our properties every single day and ensuring that if we're leasing the properties, our tenants, or if we're hiring an operating partner, our partners are taking good care of the properties, and that there's no, if we need to remediate or if we need to get involved in any way, we bring that up way earlier than it would otherwise be brought up, and we can tackle any challenges early. So that's their role. We aren't doing the farming ourselves, but we understand how to farm, and we can see problems as they're coming up, and we can also propose solutions. It's obviously a balance because we're hiring our operating partners for their expertise, and we have full faith in them. So certainly it's not our job to micromanage, but it is our job to make sure that if a property hasn't been seen, in a couple of days or weeks, and we see, maybe there's a little pond forming, well, we need to figure out what timing we need to get in place to ensure that that doesn't become an issue. Or if we see that we might need, a particular treatment, then let's get that treatment done now. An example would be actually a fun one: sunscreen. Trees need sunscreen just like people do. So trees can burn,
really?
Fruit can burn.
Interesting.
Yep. So if we see burning, the early signs of burning starting to happen, we might need our operating partner to get out there and apply sunscreen to prevent any damage to crop quality or yield. So that's the purpose of our asset management team. But we do lease our properties out to tenants, and we also hire third-party operating partners who provide the management services on the property.
Nice. All right. I just took a peek at the clock. It looks like we are running it down, but I got one last question before we hop onto the quick question round. And this is about LP investors, limited partners. So far, most of my questions, I've been kind of having the hat of if you were to go out, the investor goes out and buys his own farmland. But it sounds like what would make most sense for most people's portfolio is to become a limited partner in somebody else's operation like your own. So if somebody wanted to buy into a syndication or a fund like your guys's, what should they be looking for when they do their due diligence on the syndicator or the operator, and then also on the land itself? Like, what should they be looking for when they decide on the fund to jump into?
Certainly, great question. I would say product structure. So there's lots of different products out there. If it's we operate an open-ended fund, and there's advantages and disadvantages to every single product, but so we have an open-ended fund. I would consider the benefit of having a more liquid product like that versus a closed-end fund, or we also have special purpose vehicles that are crowd-funded deals that have stated duration periods, right? So that comes down to investor preferences, suitability, whether they're comfortable and able to have their capital locked up for a period as long as 10 years, because in farmland, that's often how long of a period that you need in order to actually execute value creation. So I would look at product structure first and foremost. I'd look at the team, make sure that the team has agricultural investing experience, make sure that the team has a solid asset management team in-house and some agronomy experience in-house, and actually understands the biology behind agriculture, and obviously, I think looking at track record, looking at portfolio composition, diversification, all of those aspects are important as well.
Yep. All right. I love it, man. Well, I'm going to move us on to the quick question round. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's go.
Let's do it. Starts with books or any form of education. Give me 2 recommendations, one for general life wisdom, one for real estate specific.
Oh, man. So for real estate, obviously, I'm going to stick with a farming book because I'm in ag real estate.
Course,
so I would go.
Of course, we'd expect nothing less.
I'd go with Dirt to Soil by Gabe Brown.
Okay.
So he talks a lot about regenerative agriculture management practices that can improve, soil and just improve sustainability and stewardship on the ground. So I think that's a great one. And yeah, I think for general life advice or just general life guidance, I I think for that one, I'm actually I'm just finishing up a leadership program through Cornell, Lead New York. And it was a 2-year program, and we it's structured around leadership and self-reflection. And I think the one that comes to mind is Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And it's an older book, but I think there's so many valuable lessons in there. And I think our baseline for an effective team is so low. It's like abysmal. And I think good teams are actually really difficult to create. So I think that book, whether it's a team in your professional life or a team at home, your family is a team, thinking through those dynamics and how to create a more effective team can be very impactful.
Yeah. Yeah. That is, I read that book. That's a really good book. All of Patrick, I can't remember how to say his last name, Lencioni or something like that.
I say Lencioni. I don't know if he's Lencioni. I don't know, but I say Lencioni.
That guy, all of his books are pretty good. So good recommendation. I'm going to move us on to the next question. And this is for your younger self. So let's go back to the David who had no experience in agribusiness. Go back to him, look him in the eye, give him one piece of advice moving forward. Before we continue on with today's guest, I want to tell you guys about a community I'm launching on School to help investors like yourself grow your own portfolio. In this community, you'll get access to all the docs I use, all the systems I've built, everything I've used to grow my own portfolio, as well as instructions and guidance on how to get out there and find great deals, how to finance those deals, and then how to manage them for great returns. Since we're just launching it, the price will be set at a measly $20 per month, and whatever price you join at is the price you'll have for life. We will be increasing the price as the group grows, so if you're at all interested in growing your portfolio along other investors, now is the time to join. I will put the link somewhere in the bio or on our podcast website at therealestateinvestingclub.com, so if you are interested, head on over there. With that said, let's get back to the podcast.
I think one piece of advice moving forward is, I would say, meet people where they are. That's a good one.
That's good.
So you never know, if you get a mean email from someone, you don't know what else is going on in their life. Big one that I would tell myself when I was first, getting out into the professional world and networking. I think, we all are programmed to be very inward seeking and thinking like, who should I meet? Who can help me? That's the wrong attitude. You should be trying to help other people, and you should be eager to meet with everyone and not have, self-interest as number one on the list. So meet people where they are, and also just go into meetings without expectations and figure out how you can help others, not how others can help you.
Great wisdom. I love it. This next question is going to be an interesting one because you're in farmland. So generally how the question goes is the United States is a big place. There's a lot of opportunities out there to invest. So what city are you most excited about investing in? But I'm going to ask you, I guess, what area, what state are you most excited about investing in today?
Oh man, that's a good question. So there's lots of states that we're excited about investing in. I don't know if I could pick one. I would say, like, generally the West Coast, we're still very excited about the West Coast. I think the Pacific Northwest, California, Arizona, all have very interesting, different, but very interesting farmland opportunities. If I were to pick one, I would probably say Oregon. And the only reason for that is the commodity mix, nothing else. So I love hazelnuts, and Oregon is by far, I think Oregon produces probably 99.9% of hazelnuts in the US. Budding Pinot Noir varieties are coming out. Oregon, really, really solid. All sorts of berries, blueberries, and other specialty fruit. So I think it's a really unique state, sort of situated between the Gorilla, California, like the ag powerhouse of the US, and Washington, which is also a powerhouse in its own right with high density apple production. So Oregon I see as this sort of up and coming player that's creating its own niche in ag.
Very cool. That's funny. My when I worked back in corporate, my boss, his family owned a hazelnut orchard, or I don't know what you call it, plantation out
Orchard.
there.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
orchard in Oregon, and we went down there one time for like a group meeting, and it was really cool. It was I love farmland just because it's a lot more peaceful than all other asset classes. So it's interesting that you said hazelnut though. Moving us on, and this is about finding deals. I'm also interested in this because I have no idea how to find good farmland deals. So, what is your favorite way to go about sourcing deals?
Oh man. So we have an internal tool called Terra that is, a proprietary tech that we've built out to help us source. So Terra has a whole bunch of different data that goes through it to help us with sourcing both on and off market deals. I would say my favorite aspect or favorite input into Terra is the use of both satellite and drone aerial imagery. I think we're able to see orchards today in a way that, 20, 30 years ago was just not possible. And with that information, we're able to tell so much about a piece of land by looking overhead. Canopy health, uniformity, tree spacing, tree count. If someone's trying to sell you, a 100-acre parcel and tell you there's 10,000 trees on it, and you're able through, through drone footagery and through AI to basically in 5 seconds spit out there's 8,700 trees on this property. That's a big delta. That's almost a 15% delta, right? Could save you some diligence costs and a trip to a property that you're otherwise going to kill. So I would say being able to see the properties overhead is a game changer.
Cool, I love it. And that platform that you mentioned, Terra, that's basically like the Crexy or the co-star of Farmland.
Uh, yeah, so it's our internal tool. Yeah,
Oh,
so
your internal. Okay, cool.
we've developed it and we're continuing to develop it and iterate on it. It'll never be done.
Nice.
But it is transformative.
Very cool. All right, this next one is about the people that help us get to where we are. So we all stand on the shoulders of giants. So give me one mentor who has contributed significantly to your career today.
It's a good one. I've had the good fortune of a number of really great mentors. I would say one that comes to mind is probably one of my professors in college, Professor Wysocki. Like many meteorology majors at Cornell, I was this close to dropping out one day because it was so freaking hard. And the classes were insane. And I had a meeting with him and he asked me what I wanted to do in life when I knew I wanted to go into finance and investing. And, his point to me was, stick it out. There are this university like produces thousands of finance candidates a year, and they're all going to look very similar on paper. We have 12 people in atmospheric science. So if for nothing else, you're looked at just because your major is different. And that helped me get my first job out of school. I think it helped me get into business school. I think it's helped me in so many different places in life. And, that's one small example, staying in the major, yes, it was the right decision, of course, but I think differentiation is so important in every aspect of life. When we look for deals, we look for differentiation. How are we going to generate alpha? That's all about differentiation. So I think that has been one message that's resonated.
Nice. Yeah, college mentors, professors, they can have a huge impact on your life. So it's good to hear he helped you along your way. That leads us to the last question. This is for the listeners. I'm sure people out there are now interested in farmland and are interested to hear how they can invest in farmland. So what is the best way for people to reach out and get in contact with you?
Farmtogether.com. We have so many resources on there. We have a learning center. We post recorded webinars. We have live offerings. Right now we have a pistachio orchard, cardinal pistachio orchard, and also a organic vineyard, which is syndicating. Hidden Oaks Organic Wine Grape Vineyard. So 2 live offerings on the platform right now. We do tenant in commons and 1031s. And so we have lots of different products that could be interesting for real estate investors. And if anyone wants to reach out or has any questions for me individually, my email is david@farmtogether.com. Happy to take any questions.
Cool. I will put those links in the show notes. So if y'all want to reach out to David, just click a little more in the description. It'll pull down the full description, and in there you can find David's links. All right, man, that wraps it up. Thank you for hopping on. This has been a learning experience for me. I can now say I know a little bit more about farmland. So thanks for hopping on.
Thanks, Gabe. This was fun.
Absolutely. For everybody who's here with us today, thank you guys for showing up. You are the reason we do this. So if you guys have any questions whatsoever, reach out to me, Gabe at therealestateinvestingclub.com. And if you guys want to support the show, all we ask is you give us a like, subscribe, share, all that jazz. Other than that, I hope you guys have an absolutely fantastic week. Keep rocking real estate, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. All right, before I officially sign off, I have a quick announcement to make. If you're interested in becoming a passive investor in one of my deals, my own company, Kaizen Properties, is looking for capital partners for our upcoming projects. We invest in what are known as recession-resistant assets, mainly self-storage facilities, mobile home and RV parks, and industrial properties. If you're interested in investing and would like to learn a little bit more about my company, our investing criteria, and some of the previous projects we've done, go to the Real Estate Investing Club podcast at therealestateinvestingclub.com and scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page. Click on the Invest With Us button. That'll pop up the investor form. Fill that out, and we will reach back out to you as soon as we can. Or if you prefer a little bit more of a personal touch, you can reach out to me at Gabe at therealestateinvestingclub.com. So really, that is it. Again, it was a pleasure hanging out with you guys during this episode, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.